So welcome back. We look forward continuing Bez Hashem today in this chapter we began last week, Kuf Yud Aleph, on page Kuf Yud Aleph, that is, 111th page. We're holding towards the bottom, 3 lines from the bottom, which begins V'ha'ora zu mislabeshes ba'elienim etachteinu. So Dr. Rebbe, if you recall, let's do this very quick, just to come in. Today is the second class on this Igeres HaKodesh. We spoke many times of the distinction of this segment of Tanya. These are not, there's no sequence of one chapter to the other. It's letters written in different times, different circumstances, even though timeless in the end of the day. This is the work of the Alter Rebbe, especially this part of the Alter Rebbe, the Igeres HaKodesh, which went and became part of Tanya. The Alter Rebbe wrote many letters, many epistles, but these were, and it made it their way, so to say it again, of course, not randomly. It was chosen. These letters per se were chosen to be part of Sefer HaTanya. Of course, in the end of the day, they're timeless, especially the information, which the enormous of the depth of the information which we glean from these letters in all areas of Torah mitzvahs, learning Torah, the mitzvahs we mentioned. Alter Rebbe underscores the mitzvah stuck on these 32 Igeres in a very, very unique way, different approach to the whole mitzvah tzedakah. As an example, which we did mention also, many of these letters are appeals for tzedakah, for the famous group of which made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael with Rav Mendel Haradoker, a Talmid Chaver of the Alter Rebbe. We mentioned in the backdrop of the history of these letters, and the Alter Rebbe underscoring the idea of mitzvah tzedakah, which of course is timeless, not referring to a particular situation then, but there was context to these letters. But you can see even before the Alter Rebbe gets to the point to support the Bnei Eretz Yisrael, and generally the Alter Rebbe underscores the virtue of giving tzedakah to Eretz Yisrael, even over the advantage of giving the even over any type of extension of by the mitzvah tzedakah to another party, which the Rebbe himself, like I say, in this Rebbe in these chapters themselves, it's in these chapters underscores this mitzvah in a very unique manner. Like I say, we never appreciate the mitzvah tzedakah before we learn it, appreciate it through the lens of the Alter Rebbe. And he has it in Likutei Amarim, of course, the famous Perek Lamed Zayin, in Likutei Amarim, in other places as well. But in Igeres HaKodesh, there's no comparison of the Alter Rebbe expands on this mitzvah. Of course, again, in the end, the Alter Rebbe always underscores the mitzvah of tzedakah, the way it's expressed to the Bnei Eretz Yisrael, giving tzedakah to Eretz Yisrael, and the backdrop to that is the Alter Rebbe was appealing to support, to his chassidim, to Anash, Anshe Shleimeinu. Many times the Alter Rebbe writes it as well, but to whoever could have at that point assisted to this group, which made Aliyah then with Rav Mendel Haradoker, which went through a very difficult time. Again, there's a whole history of the way they lived then, again with enormous poverty, and Alter Rebbe was very much made it a campaign to assist them. So thus the mitzvah tzedakah underlined in many of these Igeres HaKodesh. Even though there's certain letters that Alter Rebbe doesn't even mention the mitzvah tzedakah, so it's tefillah, Torah. But again, these letters encompass all the entire shtel, so to say, the avodah of the Yid towards his Creator. There's Prokim underscore the mitzvah of tefillah. I mean, really, it's everything really is in Igeres HaKodesh. Every idea is so beautifully explained and eloquently presented. Certain chapters underscore even the decorum of tefillah, famous Perek Chav Dalet. We didn't learn it yet, and what prayer is all about. And there's certain mitzvahs. There's certain Prokim chapter the Alter Rebbe underscores the idea of the Torah, actually, this without even mentioning any other mitzvah. 10 people learning Torah. Chapter before that, Chav Gimel. In any case, at this point, Alter Rebbe in Perek Zayin, The Rebbe begins, fortunate are we, which is the famous prayer, recitation prior towards the beginning of the davening, before we say Haidul Hashem, Kiru Shmei Deva Melesa, which is basically the formal beginning of the prayer, as we daven together, starting from Haidul, but before that, certain communities even start from earlier in davening, but this is the very beginning of the prayers. How fortunate are we? And how good is our lot, or our portion? How sweet is our lot? Which, of course, every expression over here is with maximum precision. And the Alter Rebbe brings a few psukim which have the same connotations. Hashem enas chelki, v'chaysi atotemer geirali, my lot. Again, you see the two expressions. So Alter Rebbe starts explaining what is this idea of chelkenu. And he brings this which is mentioned not in a positive spirit when someone connects with different iniquities. The expression is, ein lechelik v'lekeser, doesn't have a portion in the God of Israel. So what? The God of Israel is combined of portions? What's that supposed to mean? Asks the Alter Rebbe. We know Hashem is Echad, Tachlis Apshitus. So Hashem is the ultimate. Hashem is about the ultimate oneness, the ultimate Pshitus, everything else but combination of parts. So what does it mean? Doesn't have a part in the God of Israel? What is this Lashon expression of Chelkenu? And eventually the difference of Chelkenu Ged Aleinu, a part, a portion, and then a lot, which we can right away understand the difference. A lot is something which is exclusive. Someone wins a lottery. It's about the winner of the lottery vis-a-vis portions. Everybody could be part of it. But again, the Alter Rebbe begins explaining this by quoting the pasuk Heaven and earth I fill. So Hashem, of course, is hu mekayim shalaylam. That Hashem fills every part of the entire Seder Ishtalshalusa, of everything, the whole Metzias, and of course, Malay of Ani. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's no place you can say is devoid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We talk about Seder Shtalsa because this is something which we're part of, particularly the Salem Hazi. You can't say, of course, any domain and say, no, Hashem is somewhere in the spiritual sublime world or beyond that. And this place is devoid of the core, the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You can't say that, of course, because where did Hashem go? Why is that place devoid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? As the pasuk says, as the Shemaim Yisrael, it's animali, heaven and earth. There's no domain which is devoid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of course not. But in the same token, if you have the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu present everywhere, how can there be a Shamayim? How much more so, how can there be Aretz? This is talking about the ultimate finite, the ultimate spirit of the ultimate reality of finitude, heaven, earth, especially Elam Hazah. For that matter, it exists even in the highest world. Atzilus, Bri, Atzilus, Elamis, which are finite. The definition of Olam is about finitude, expression of finitude. It conceals the creator, and that's the only way this world could exist as a world, take formation as a world. Because if not, a world which is finite, one way or another, even Atzilus, which houses the Ein Sof, it's still Olam, Atzilus, 10 spheres, Midas. Midas is about measurement, one way or another, even though the Midas of Atzilus are believable. We spoke about this so many times, of course. No one has to appreciate these matters. Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Asir, from other chapters, which myriads of times we explain this. How much more so when you talk about Bri, Yitzir, Asir. This is this world which we live in. Everything about this world is about is an expression of is about limitation, finiteness. How could the infinite Ein Sof be part of the Shamayim and part of the Aretz? Or Moli Shamayim Aretz, how could the finite exist in the face of the infinite? Nothing can exist in the face of the infinite. Everything is consumed into the infinite if the infinite stands in its total expression of manifestation or is totally manifest. We gave an example. Though we appreciate the sun as the warmth of the sun, the brightness of the sun, the pleasantness of the sun. But the reason why we can appreciate it is because the sun is all the way up there. It's not mole. My front lawn or my backyard, if it was mole, for that matter, if the sun became a little too close, everything would have been consumed within seconds into, maybe even less, into the heat of the sun, and literally wouldn't be given the chance to exist even for a moment. We're not talking about warmth, brightness, shine, pleasantness, nothing. It would just not exist. There's no chance for the world to exist if the sun gotten a little too close to planet Earth, as an example. The reason why planet Earth couldn't exist, and appreciate, for that matter, the great contributions of the sun, is because the sun stands on afar. If the sun would come too close, especially land down here, there wouldn't be a down here, because the overwhelming brightness and heat of the sun would consume everything in its way, which it got close to. So when you say it's a Shemayim, it's a Nimole, the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu fills heaven and earth. The core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Ein Sof, is infinite, the finite. And how could there be the terminology of heaven and earth? Heaven and earth cannot exist. Heaven and earth, which is all about finite, the finite cannot exist in the face of the infinite, understandably. So no need to elaborate. So the Alter Rebbe goes on and explains, yes, of course, the Shemaim Zaretz Animali, the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, exists everywhere. Like explains, it says, Hashem is not manifest, his core is not manifest in Olam, because again, there wouldn't be any opportunity for Olam, for a world to exist, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself would be manifest. If the Ein Sof, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, would be manifest, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu contracts and conceals his infinite Eir. Similar to the sun, the difference of the sun is not present in this world. It's not that it's here and it conceals its light. We just use this as an example in order to appreciate this idea, but it's, of course, there's no similarity in essence to this example, this metaphor we're giving regarding with the sun, to this which is explained in this chapter, because the sun does not exist in this. It's not here and it's just not manifest, and therefore the world can exist. The sun is all the way up there. But one thing we can appreciate, the sun got a little too close, nothing would be able to exist. The sun has to be removed, withdrawn. When it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's Ani Moli. Of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence is Ani, because you can't say when it comes to the sun, it could be up there. The world lives independently of the sun. But when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what you can say in any domain, this is devoid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Where did Hashem go? Hashem is everything. Everything is Hashem. So there you must say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there, but he conceals himself. There is the contraction of the Ein Sof, the Ein Sof, in a way that it shouldn't be manifest, it shouldn't be revealed, experienced. And that gives room for Eretz and Shamayim, for heaven and earth to exist. Now conversely, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is concealed, so what gives energy to heaven and earth? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu is removed, again, not removed the way we talk about the sun removed, which is actually removed. It's impossible when you talk about HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be actually removed from nowhere. But he conceals himself, that it shouldn't be manifest, meaning to say that there shouldn't be the revelation, the appearance or the revelation or the experience of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's the way anything could exist. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu contracts it, his infinite light, and reconceals and hides, so to say, his infinite light. And therefore anything else can exist. Eretz v'shamayim, heaven and earth, can exist. And not only Eretz v'shamayim, even like us we mentioned again, time and again, even the world of Atzilus could not exist if Hashem would not conceal his infinite light. Of course not. Nothing could exist in the face of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How much more so when we're talking about B'riyat Tzira Asiya, in this very physical world as an example, which is the ultimate expression of limitation of finiteness. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to conceal this infinite light in order this should be able to exist and be and live on and produce and so on. the experience of all Elamis, their function, their being brought into existence and vivified, and in this world, for example, it's a happening world, the sun, the moon, the whole every day, every hour, every minute, every second performance of Elam Haza, starting from its mere existence. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu concealed himself and contracted his great Eir, so how do you know in the end of the day, how does this exist? In other words, you hide the Ein Sof, granted. So there's room for anything else to exist, but in the end of the day, if you hide the Ein Sof, so how could they exist? So they don't have any independent energy. To say, oh, we have an independent energy, but the too much light would not work with us, similar to the example we just gave, that the world itself, Elam Haza itself, has independent life other than the sun. So the independent Elam Haza tells the sun you can't get too close because, or it has to be worked out in a way that the sun cannot get too close to Elam Haza because to this planet Earth. Let's talk about planet Earth. Because then the planet Earth will be consumed to the heat of the sun. So sun, please stay in a good position that you could contribute to planet Earth via your beautiful light and warmth and, again, pleasantness, which the sun brings. Don't get too close. But when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can't say that. Because there's no independent light and which would vivify, which would give existence to this world. Again, let's talk about Elam Asiyah. It refers, of course, to all worlds, but let's talk about, for example, this world. To say the Ani of Hashem, the Ein Sof of Hashem must be concealed and must be removed, or so must be in a state of a non-revealed state. In order for Elam Haza, so Shamayim, V'Sa'aretz, heaven and earth, to exist, to be. Please don't get too close. Conceal your infinity, your Ein Sofness, if you will. Can't say that. Because heaven and earth do not have their independent energy. Heaven and earth is only there because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mehave U'Mechaya U'Mekayim, brings to existence, vivifies, and it allows existence to live, to be. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is present or he's concealed. Which one is it? Dr. Rebbe explains. This is what it says. Yes, of course. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's core, the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is concealed. But a trickle of light comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is only a trickle of light. Why is it trickle? Because Hashem concealed his Ein Sof and contracted his Ein Sof in order that it should not be manifest, but in the end of the day, there is a trickle of light which comes and establishes, gives life and existence to Shamayim, heaven and earth. And we explain this in so many different ways. A famous mashal, a teacher, a prodigy, which a Talmud Chacham, that is, a Ilui, a Talmud Chacham, again, let's say in the context of Torah, decides to teach a student. And the student, again, young in age or young in stage, he's trying to bring him close to the information of Torah, as an example. So he has to contract, yes, all his knowledge, if you want to call it, his Ein Sof type of knowledge. Because if he just starts learning and presenting the information that he's so acquainted with to the student, he would, by definition, this would not be a student, it would not be a pupil, which is sitting there to receive the information, because this is information which is, as the expression, would just go over, straight over. So what does he have to do? He has to contract his knowledge. He put all his, conceal, condense his knowledge, and a trickle of that knowledge to be presented to the pupil, which is kind of teaspooning, little tidbits. And sometimes he has to, even that itself, he has to camouflage it in a story, in a presentation which the child or the student could appreciate on their level. And in the end of the day, give more and more and more, open himself a bit more. It says after 40 years, the Talmud, a truth, the student could even not only regarding the information, what he's taught to absorb and appreciate and perceive and understand, but even could start thinking similar to the Rav, to his teacher. So you see over here that there's nothing the Talmud knows, that the student knows on his own, other than information which is shared by the teacher. It's only the teacher, the presence of the teacher, the information the teacher is divulging, which establishes this student to be a proper student or a true student of this master. But conversely, if the master would open himself up in the very beginning, presenting the knowledge the way he knows it, he appreciates the knowledge, there wouldn't be any phenomenon of a student. There wouldn't be a starting point. He could sit 40 years, 400 years, he wouldn't know anything, nothing at all. So the only way that the student could be called a student and glean information from this master is when the master conceals his infinite knowledge the way, in other words, his knowledge the way he appreciates all the information he studies. In the context of Torah, all matters of Torah which he's so acquainted with, and just little by little, like a trickle of light, a trickle of information to the student, and then the student appreciates this. Oh, I got this. And many times, as we said, even that information could be a bit too deep for the student. You have to put it into the framework of a metaphor, a mashal, which is known in the context of information between the giver, the teacher, and the student, and the recipient. And it's exactly the same thing when it comes to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Of course, everything, just the way everything the student has for the master. But the master cannot open himself up in the very beginning. Be too much, be too overwhelming. The infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu cannot be present together with a finite Shamayim and Aretz, because Shamayim and Aretz would not exist in the face of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Conversely, Shamayim and Aretz do not have any independent information, any energy. It's coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu conceals his great light, and a trickle of light comes becomes the creating force, the creating energy of heaven and ultimately of earth. And in all matters of heaven and earth, in all details, and millions and billions and beyond details which exist in him. And there's and this trickle of light creates them with their style, character, taste, or whatever it is. So this Alter Rebbe brings the pasuk that Hashem's name, which is also not the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the core infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even his name, because Hashem and his name are one, so his name is also overwhelming and overpowering in order to coexist with Eretz Shemayim. Eretz Shemayim would not exist if Hashem's name even would be manifest. So Kinizkav Shema, his name is exalted and removed, concealed. Hoide al Eretz Shemayim, a trickle of light from the Shemai is al Eretz Shemayim, heaven and earth, gives chayis, gives light. It becomes a life force, an existing force to heaven and earth, and all levels of heaven and earth, spiritual heaven, spiritual earth. But even when we talk about Eretz Shemayim Kashmir, physical heaven and physical earth, is because there's a hoid, not even of the hoid of the Shemai of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is al Eretz Shemayim. So what we were holding, that matter, that's how lucky Am Yisrael is. Actually, it's in the pasuk itself. The final words of the pasuk is Vayorim Kerem Ha'amay, which means the Yid has a connection to the core, to the etzem, to the keren of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we just made a bracha. We're sitting in Elam Hazeh, which is the whole existence of Elam Hazeh. You see Alter Rebbe's expression in some different places. Later in Igeres HaKedesh, but of course famous in the end, Sharich B'Munah. And we can only appreciate it must be just the smallest trickle of light. Al Rebbe even says that trickle of light also has to go through different contractions, because in the end of the day, it's a trickle of light of the Shem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which Hu Shmei Echad, Hashem and His name is one, which everything is connected to the infinite of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So even the trickle of light has in it Ein Sof, and ultimately, how could that create heaven and earth? So it has to be an additional contractions and concealment of the greatness of that, even with that trickle of light, in order to be the energy of heaven and earth. So we sit over here in an area which is just part of the height of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The ziv, just a trickle of light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you will, even so distant from the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But it's not distant in reality. It's distant in experience, because in reality, with the Ein Sof didn't go anywhere. But in experience, we're so distant. But yeah, you could take even somebody just make a bracha and say Baruch Atah Hashem. You connect to the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Elam Hazeh. That's what Torah mitzvahs. Because the whole Chayil Mabah experience is only, like the Alter Rebbe explains in the beginning of Tanya, chapter Daled, 4th chapter, V'kutei Amorim, is only ziv. It's only a ray of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's an enemy ziv Ashchin. It's a ray of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the same trickle of light, which even creates a above. That's the whole experience of the Neshamas Agreinim. But in this world, a person could say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu. Connect with the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You open a Mishnah, you have the whole entire HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The whole Ein Sof, the Ani of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Neichi Hashem Elokeinu, which is what Torah mitzvahs are all about. If it's a bracha, we say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu is already the Shem Elokim, which is part of the Ziv of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, becomes Melech HaOlam. But the point is, we have a connection to Hashem, to the deeper parts of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because a Yid is a Chelik Hashem Amai, not Elokim. A Yid comes from the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we have the ability to connect, to fuse the Hashem with the Elokeinu, and beyond the Hashem, Atah, which is similar to Anechi Hashem Elekecha, Baruch Atah, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu, which is Anechi Hashem Elekecha, the first formal presentation or first formal revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Am Yisrael. He said, this is what the entire package of Torah mitzvahs, that you live in an area which is just about the Ziv of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rei of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. With you as a Yid, I'm giving you the whole Torah mitzvahs. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Nasati lachem, it says, I'm giving you Torah, I'm giving you myself, as the Gemara says. Together with a package of Torah. I sold myself. Put himself into Torah. That a Yid learns a Mishnah, he has the entire Eivishter, the entire HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Could you compare that to Gan Eden, which is experience of Ziv? A ray of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You learn a Mishnah, you have the entire Hashem. A mitzvah is about the Ivarim, the Malkot, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. And this is the reason why we must say a bracha before we start learning Torah or doing any mitzvah. We're saying, what is this all about? That we, in this Elam Hazeh, could connect Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, to bring, to connect the Atah, the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this Ani Molei, connected to Shamayim and Aretz, connected to Melech HaOlam, being a king, in other words, the connection to Olam, to fuse the Hashem with Olam, starting from the Anochi Hashem Elikecha, Atah Hashem Elikeinu, and connected to be Melech HaOlam. And that's what the end of the pasuk, La'amai, to his nation, Vayarim Keren La'amai. We, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu's nation, have the merit, and it's beyond merit, that despite that it's only Haidel, that it's Shema, Vayarim Keren La'amai, that if we could connect to the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we could reveal more and more, we can fuse, synthesize the Yeshua Shemaim, the Ani Molei, with a trickle of light, the Haidei, which is only a Letzer Shemaim. Similar to that student that eventually, after 40 years, the student starts thinking like his master, Koyim Inish Adaita Derabye. And not only, again, appreciating the information, but it's a transformative experience, that he becomes similar to the Rab. The fusion of the two, which is the idea of Yimei Mashiach. This is the point of Dira B'Tachtenim, that Kodesh Baruch Hu himself, Dira, the Nisava Kodesh Baruch Hu, this Lois Baruch, that Kodesh Baruch Hu's core becomes a Dira, a dwelling place B'Tachtenim, the very physical world. This is what we say every single day in davening. L'Shem Yichud Kutsho B'Richu Shchinte, the fusion of the transcendent dimension of Kodesh Baruch Hu, the Ani with the Shchinte, with the ray which becomes Shochenet, Shchinte Meloshen Shochenet, Umitlabeshet, B'Tachtenim, in all worlds, ultimately in this very physical world, which is the lowest of all. And the fusion of two, the Yichud Kutsho B'Richu Shchinte, is the ultimate purpose. The connection of the Asara Aseres Adiris with the Asara Ma'amarot, which is associated, of course, with Shechina Elokeinu. This Asara Ma'amarot is only a Ziv and Ha'ara, like we learned in Shayich B'Emunah. And the idea is to fuse the two. This is the Aved of the Yid, to fuse the two, which will ultimately go manifest with becoming a Mashiach. Now, we're not totally going up, but we're just quoting this pasuk. It'll be the end of the pasuk. But Al doesn't quote the end of the pasuk. Al is underscoring over here that everything is just a ziv, aura of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which ultimately gives room, it gives establishment for Shemayim V'Aretz, for heaven and earth. Now, before we just go on with the text, where we're holding, we're quoting from a few places. Again, we mentioned that this is the fourth segment of Tanya. There's Likutei Amorim, Shaykh Emunah, Igeres HaTshuva, and this is the fourth. Ultimately, there's the fifth, Kontra Sachin. Spoken many times. It's precise idea of five, because this is the Tanya, the Sefer Tanya being the Teresh Biksav of Teres Achsidus, and that's why there's, in the end, there's 5 parts to the Tanya. So we're learning right now Igeres HaKodesh, but Allah himself many times quotes the other Chalakim in Tanya, many times even in these few moments, which quote different places. In the 4th chapters, we mentioned the 4th chapter of 4th, 37th, and other places which we quoted from previous learning. So we merited, as we mentioned quite a few times, maybe towards the beginning of the class, wherever you're watching it, there's the advantage of learning the study by the original website, which is Tanya Online, one word, tanyaonline.com, and you have the ability to connect or to access all the previous chapters. It's literally a click away. We talk about, let's say, Likutei Amorim, which was the first segment. All the classes are lined up on the left side of the site. All the segments, and again, you see it's divided. Of the Likutei Amorim, Sheikh B'Emunah, Igeres HaTshuva, and again, presently, Igeres HaKodesh, which is the 7th epistle. You could see it in the beginning, so it's a click away. For example, we said Perik Daled, the 4th chapter of Likutei Amorim, so it's all the way at the bottom, 4th chapter of Likutei Amorim. Again, there's multiple classes, but you could find it one way or another. The advantage also, you have this, the text is in a separate scroll bar, which is easy to follow the class. But again, wherever you're watching, wherever you're learning Tanya, just mentioning this, that it's easy to access all the different chapters, which again, there's always these cross references which exist. And many times Al Rebbe himself says, look there, and I explained it and elaborated on this point in other places, and namely in the previous segments, which again, it's a click away to find. So we go on again, Kuf Yud Aleph, 111th page in the original text, the corresponding English text, the Ha'ara Zu, this Ha'ara, this expression, this ray of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, invests, mamish invests, which means it established the existence of all the supreme worlds and inferior worlds, ultimately Tel Mazat Tachtin, and not only generally we talk about Mazat Tachtin with all the multitude of creations which exist in all levels and all worlds, including El Mazat Tachtin, in this very physical world. So he says this Ara invests in Elyenim Tachtenim, Lachyesim, to give them life, and it doesn't just like hover over, encompass, kind of a peripheral connection. You exist, maybe find your style of existence. You, the apple, find your style, and your taste, your color, the orange, find your style. I'll just kind of hover over and give the ability to exist and grow and ultimately have this the ability to, in the end of the day, your seek to produce further and so on. However, the evolution of Elam Haza, the way it's established by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not like that, of course. It's nitfeses b'seichel. The reason why the apple has its color and flavor and character and style, or its appearance as an example, is because the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is nitfeses, is right there within the growth of the apple, within the apple itself, if you will, and gives it that style, that flavor, that character as an example. And that's the point of nitfeses b'seichel. But of course, even a trickle of light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how could it enter into the apple and the orange and every part of the Elam Hazeh? Or in any of the sun and the moon, it's all finite creations of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the answer is that even, as we mentioned before, even the ray, of course, because the ray is also coming from the Ein Sof, so of course it's not the full brightness of the Ein Sof, but a ray of the Ein Sof doesn't have Ein Sof, infinite energy in it. And how could infinite energy create a finite heaven and earth? Especially with all the details and specificities which exist within Elam. We just mentioned 1, 2, but there's millions and billions and beyond, and trillions and beyond. And of course, if the creation has a particular style, it's because the energy is creating that exactly the way it is in its appearance, of the smallest creature in the depth of the ocean. It's exactly the way it's created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by design. So it's nitfeses b'seichel, but of course, a ray of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is, in the end of the day, has infinite energy. How could it create the finite? And this question exists even of the greatest, or the creations of such grandeur like the sun. Also, in the end of the day, it's limited and finite. Especially when you deal with all these details, the smallest, and again, in presentation of creation. When you say they're created by design, means to say it's nitfeses b'seichel, and creates exactly the way they appear. So you must say that even the ray also experiences many tzimtzumim, contractions and concealments, in order for that energy ultimately to create heaven and earth with all its details and specificities, the way heaven and earth is created. That's what Alter Rebbe continues, that even the Ziv has nitfeses b'seichel intermediaries. But again, in context, intermediaries mean to say that which allows creation to come into existence the way creation exists. With many contractions, many vatsumim, intense, not only quantitative, the multitude, the rabbim, but also the qualitative, the intense concealments and the intense contractions of the infinite as we have the evolution of all these levels via ilaval. So very briefly, ilaval literally translates cause and effect. And the cause becomes the source of an effect, and that effect becomes the source, the cause of the following effect. Explained many times in Chassidus, for example. Intellect and emotions are ilava because you gravitate to something, or you revere something, or you fear an idea because you understood it, you appreciate it, you perceive it in your mind that it's for example, when you're talking about avo, love, or gravitation to idea, because your mind understood and perceived that this is something that could contribute to your well-being, as an example. So you're inclined to it, you gravitate to it. This idea is dangerous, let's say, or not to such a degree, but you have to be careful. So it ignites, it establishes, not only ignites, it produces a sense of awe, fear, appreciating the greatness of another party, let's say. It ignites, or it produces, even it's called toldis chabad, it produces a sensation of reverence, as an example. So the cause is the intellectual appreciation. The effect is the expression, the midas, the sensational expression to this which you understood, this which you appreciated. So that's the effect of it. The midas become the ilah of machshava d'bermaisa, because you're emoting in a certain manner. This causes you to think a certain way, to talk in a certain way, to do in a certain way. So the machshava d'bermaisa becomes the effect of the cause which these midas which they remain the effect of the cause, which is the intellectual appreciation. Now they become the cause for something, another effect of your thought, your speech, your action. This is the idea of ilul va'ol, and this is the basis of the evolution of the entire order of evolution, which we know and say that ishtalshalos. The Rebbe continues this ha'ara even on high it shines and it extends itself with he says blikvul. Let's put it in context. Blikvul means with infinite expression, but we're not talking about the infinite expression of the Ein Sof itself, because the Ein Sof, it can be blikvul lahachis el yenim nelam in len case with tachlis, to bring life to the hidden worlds, the most sublime worlds. You cannot say the true bleak vul of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is manifest, and there should be Eilamis even of the highest order, of the highest level, the most sublime type of Eilamis, because Eilamis cannot exist in the face of the true bleak vul Ein Sof of the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We spoke many times. Nothing of the highest, most refined type of Eilam cannot be present when the Ein Sof, when the infinite true infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is manifest. So in this context, it doesn't mean bleak vul of the Ein Sof, it means the bleak vul of the ha'ara, of the ray of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Which means that even that ray, of course, on a higher level, there is less tzimtzumim, less contractions, less concealments of that trickle of light, because it's not creating bria, yitzira, especially a world like this finite world. It's creating higher, sublime, lofty. He says, nelamim. Concealed means to say they're concealed, because we mentioned many times, we say alma de iskasya as opposed to alma de isgal. Not to get into it, it's brought many times in Zayir and Kabbalah and Chassidus. The hidden worlds and the revealed worlds. On the surface, one would say, oh, the revealed worlds are so much greater and higher than this which is hidden, but of course the opposite is so true. We spoke about this many times, because when you say a revealed world, what is revealed? The Eilam Shabbai, the concealment of it is manifest. We talk about Alma Diskasya, which is the Eilam itself is the Eilam. In other words, the Helen Behester is hidden because it's overwhelmed by the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It says, like the Mashiach will come, it says, the knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu will fill Mala Oretz, will fill the land, Kamaim Le'al Mechasim, like the ocean covers, or the water covers the ocean bed, the ocean floor. So everything is concealed or revealed. No, it's the opposite, because you have the overwhelming revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's mechasim, the Eilam Shabbai. In other words, creation is covered, meaning to say it's overwhelmed by the energy of Creator. So this is a deeper level when you say Alma di Iskasya, a world which is hidden. The world Shabbai, the Elam V'Hester Shabbai, the concealment which establishes this world is mechuseh, is covered by the great light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the world becomes a higher, of course, loftier, sublime world. As opposed to Alma di Iskalia, the Eilam Shabbai is revealed. So of course, it's infinitely lower meaning to say of in level than a world when the Eilam Shabbai is mechuseh, because here the Eilam, the concealment, is revealed, so it becomes more of a world which conceals in its appearance, in its presentation of the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Alter Rebbe writes, it's a similar expression, Eilam es ne'elamim, hidden worlds, which means the Eilam Shabbai, the Helen Behester, the concealment, which makes them in the world as a Eilam, as a world, is ne'elam, because they're overwhelmed by the great light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So these are lofty, sublime worlds. So of course the ray on high is more bleak vul, is more infinite, not the manifestation of the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we say bleak vul over here, of course it's not the Ein Sof, because the Ein Sof, when they have the revelation of the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinite of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no Eilam can exist, even a Eilam ne'elam, even as the most spiritual worlds cannot exist when you have the true bleak vul, infinite expression, manifestation of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nothing could exist in the face of the infinite. But here he's talking about when you're in the ha'ara, in this trickle of light, on high, it expresses itself in a manner of bleak vul, one way or another. Can't compare to the light, the way it's on high, to the light, the way it's meant to create a physical world. Planet Earth, which everything in planet Earth is about the total stark hell and vehester of Beta Benibra. That's why it's a limited world. Everything about this world is limited and finite. So of course then the ray of HaKadosh Baruch Hu has greater contractions and concealments, which means it contracts itself and it's allowed itself to be concealed more and more and more in order to create finiteness, the way it comes to its full expression in Elam Haza. But on high, it stands and it expresses itself with its blikvulness. So it is a ray in one end, and it allows Elam's worlds to exist. But on the other hand, on that level, there's so much less contract. In other words, much less of concealment of or cover up of its great iron. Therefore, it does create worlds which express themselves so much less in their Eilam, so to say, in the consumed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. For example, the world of Atzilus, we explained it. The world of Atzilus is called the Eilam Nelam. Because the Eilam of Eilam Atzilus is Nelam, because Eilam Atzilus is a world which houses the infinite of HaKadosh. It says the Midas of Atzilus are Midas Blikvul, Chesed is Blikvul. Which is paradoxical a bit, because you're dealing with a Midah. How could a Midah be Blikvul? Midah's measurement, Blikvul is Blikvul, without any measurement, without any border. But that's what Atzilus is all about. It's an Eilam, but it's an Eilam Nelam, meaning to say the concealment of the Eilam is concealed because it's overwhelmed with the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the extent it's called Bichlal Eilam is Ha'ein Sof, because the Ein Sof HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very much manifest in the world of Atzilus, and therefore its expressions, its midah is Blikvul. Chesed of Atzilus is Chesed Blikvul. Gvura is Gvura Blikvul. The combination eventually gives room to later, as the Alter Rebbe explains, Sharich of Emunah. There could be the Bri Yitzir Asir, which is a separate dimension. Atzilus is not only the first of four, there's many more, but in the overall Adalid Olamot Klaliyim, it's divided, it's compartmentalized. Atzilus is still part of the Eilam. So Olam Ne'elam, Bri Yitzir Asir, there begins the Eilam is Gluyim, till we have Eilam Azatachna, the Eilam Shabai. The concealment is so galui, it's so revealed that you have to look and find and seek HaKadosh Baruch Hu Elukuz, the divine reality. But so on the areas, for example, of Atzilus, of course, that ray is Blikvul, creates Atzilus, but it says not only Atzilus, all the Eilam is Ne'elamim. And how many Eilam is Ne'elamim? He says Lein Kates, infinite. Lein Kates V'tachlis, as the Alter Rebbe explains and mentions in the end of Perek, chapter 51 or 52, in 52, I believe, in Likutei Amarim, you could see there, Alter Rebbe has Arav as a Yuvon. In other words, there's an infinite amount of elements. We say again, generally it's Atzilus, B'ri Yitzir, but there's infinite amount of elements, and there's infinite amount of elements, Le'en Kates, elements Ne'elamim Le'en Kates. So in that area of the light, that trickle of light coming in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it expresses itself, of course, in a way of Blikvul, in comparison, relatively speaking, because it creates Eilamis Ne'elamim Le'en Kates, infinite amount of it. Even the fact that it creates infinite amount of Eilamis. How could a ray create infinite amount of Eilamis if it's just a ray and it's ultimately fine? And no, the ray itself carries the energy of Ein Sof, of course. So it could create an infinite amount of Eilamis, and these Eilamis are Ne'elamim because they're the godly reality, the divine reality, so manifest in these elements. Again, a classic example would be Eilam Atzilus. But like it says in Yidr Rabba, and Afal Pikein Biridos Olamata, but when it comes, starts manifesting lower here, as we just explained, and then it has to adapt these tzimtzumim rabim, these many tzimtzumim, these many contractions, these many concealments and cover-ups, in order to create creations, formations, and actions. Nivraim, Yitzurim, Vanasim. And what do we hear over here? Bria, Nivraim would be Bria, corresponding to Bria. Yitzurim would be corresponding to Elam Yitzira. Nasim is Elam Asiya. So then, of course, it attains many more tzimtzumim, and it contracts its infinite energy to ultimately be the source and get involved and invest in a world like Bria. The formation of Gan Eden, of course, Bria is a combination of many neshamas malachim, Eilam, namely, as we know, Bria is Eil Gan Eden Ha'elyon. There's the chambers of the different levels within Eilam Bria itself. But Bria, of course, in comparison to Eilam Yitzira, is a very spiritual world. You can't compare Eilam in Gan Eden Ha'elyon to Gan Eden HaTachtin, which Yitzira, that's the area of Gan Eden HaTachtin. And again, Eilam Yitzira is a whole world with its own whole establishment. So of course, at that point, when it starts, it's we mentioned many times. Alter Rebbe is alluding to this idea when he speaks about. He doesn't say clearly Atzilus vis-a-vis Bri Yitzira Asiya, but he definitely alludes to this. He says Nelamim, and there's Nelamim, which Olam Atzilus is definitely Olam Nelam, because the Olam is Nelam because it's overwhelmed with the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There you have more the bleak vul dimension of this ray, or the ray with the way it stands more in its purity, meaning to say in its connection to its source, to the Ein Sof, and therefore Olam Atzilus is a world which houses it, overwhelmed by the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, in context, it's all associated with that ray of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but nonetheless, there's a belief of that ray of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But when it comes down, it's a different story. It has to adapt with many more tzimtzumim to bring about Elam HaNivroim, Elam HaBriya, Yitzurim, Elam HaYitzira, V'Nasim, Elam HaSiyah. Different phenomenon within the experience of the ray itself. And for that matter, you can't even compare the way the ray expresses itself in Elam to Elam HaBriya, and therefore it creates a very lofty and sublime world in comparison. Gan Eden Ha'elyon is in Elam HaBriya. So when it comes to create, to further descend, so to say, and create Elam HaYitzira is of course a new level of tzimtzumim. And therefore, Elam HaYitzira, that is the reason why Elam HaYitzira is distinct in Elam HaBriya. The Gan Eden HaTachtin, different phenomenon completely. And then when that area has to continue, so to say, it's not a matter of time. It's a matter of the way it's just the evolution of this area, the way the air comes and creates evolution of the system, if you will. Say the Ishtalshus, when it creates Elam HaAsiya, of course, it needs to adapt many more tzimtzumim to create the world which we live in, and give it chayes, nitvis b'seichem, and be the reason why every item and every manner of Elam Hazeh looks and appears the way it does. It's nitvis b'seichem, creates a world, of course, many more tzimtzumim, to the extent there's so many tzimtzumim, now we have to even find and seek and search the Creator within creation. Why should that be? If the whole reality of creation is just a manifestation of Creator, answer, because there's more tzimtzumim to that trickle of light which created Elam HaAsiya, this physical world. So Alter Rebbe will conclude today's class. Alter Rebbe, with his important message, says that this ha'ara on the overall is divided. So it's really a whole subject. Maybe we should wait till next week, but let's just at least get to be able to follow the Alter Rebbe is trying to explain something, right? The Ashereinu Matev Chalkeinu, the idea of Chalakim, and so on, and the expression rather of Chalkeinu. So let's just at least generally just present this final idea of this part. You see that this chapter is divided into two. Let's see if maybe we can get to the next few lines to the end, till the Vihine. And maybe we'll pick up a little more in this coming week, but just let's try and understand as much as we could in the time which is left for us in this class. So, Misperzu. He nechlekes. There's 5 lines from the top. In derech klal misper teryag. Kineged teryag mitzatayr. Shein teryag min yamshach as ha'ar zu mein sof baruch lahoyir u'nishmus ha'odam haklulo miramachi vorim shesagidim. Asher ba'avuroi ikir tachlis yiridus b'hamshach as ha'ar zu. Let's try to first translate that this hamshach, this light which comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu is generally divided into the number of 613, corresponding to the 613 the mitzvahs of Torah, which are 613 types of expressions and manifestations from the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to shine to the soul of man, which is also a combination of 613, which is 248 limbs, and 364 sinews, for which which for the neshama was the main purpose and objective of the descent and the evolution of this light down here to all of creation. Again, you have Bri Yitzir Asiyah, to all of creations, to all of formations, to all of actions. Expression of Asiyah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Nasim, Shetachlis Kol Adam Kineda. The ultimate objective is about man, as it's known. And again, we'll pick up the Vihine next week. So what does Alter Rebbe say? Alter Rebbe is basically saying over here, so the light comes down, the light, and it ultimately becomes the creative. There it expresses itself with more bligvul, and then eventually manifests in a different style, with many more tzimtzumim, until it creates a mabriya, yitzira, nasiya. But there's something about this light, says the Alter Rebbe, that it ultimately divides itself in 613 expressions. Why so? Where does 613 come in? So the Alter Rebbe says that as Hashem is creating all this, Hashem is expressing himself in different ways. Through that ray, that trickle, that hoide, which becomes the Eretz HaShamayim. By the way, Eretz HaShamayim alludes to also Eretz is, Shamayim is the heaven, but not only heaven, of course, ultimately refers to heaven in this physical world, and Eretz is the land of the physical world, but also heaven and earth. And it alludes to the two levels of elements. There's elements which are more heavenly, like Elamat Silus, Almediskasya, Elamis Nelamim, and there's Eretz, which is more the Bria Yitzirasiyah. So it's the height of HaKadosh Baruch Hu expressing itself, creating, becoming the source of Elamat Silus, and eventually the Eretz, which is Bria Yitzirasiyah. But why is Hashem doing all that? What is the purpose of all that? What's the reason Hashem is getting involved in? And Bichlal, why does Hashem need all this? Why is it just that? Why do we have the need for the Hayd and the Shmai? Let there just be a total manifestation of the Ein Sof, and so there's no world. So maybe it's a better idea, right? What it says, Hashem Mishalei Nivra, fortunately the person wasn't created. That's talking about the person himself. This is the famous argument of the Gemara, is a good man was created, and it says, better if we wouldn't be, and we wouldn't exist, and if not only the human being, and of course the Gemara is talking about in context that man becomes susceptible, vulnerable, goes into a situation after living in El Mazik, called Adrochim, Mecheskas Sakon, all the ways have that chazaka, that, so to say, conduciveness to danger. As a person goes out on a way, on journeys, of course, it's different than the safety and security the person has within his own home. The home, the domain of the neshama, and its comfort, and with its innate, inherent comfort is all the way on high. Why would Hashem send the neshama down into the world, enter into a physical body, an animal soul, ultimately in the physical world, which there's so much susceptibility to sin? Says the Gemara, better if we would not be created. But if we were created, let's try to do what we have to do and stay focused. And if chas v'shalom we fall, we do tshuva. Fortunate one who didn't sin, but if you sin, do tshuva, and so on. But conceptually, of course, it's better if we wouldn't be created. Why come into such a situation, such a vulnerable situation? But we're not only talking about the Yid or the Neshama, the whole idea of Olam. Why isn't it just a constant, the way it was before Hashem created the world? The Ein Sof was manifest. The way the Ein Sof was Shemaim, there was no Shemaim V'Aretz, it was only the Ani of HaKadosh Baruch. And the answer is, we spoke myriads of times. The famous Nisav HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we just quoted earlier, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted, for whatever reason, a dira v'tachtenim, dwelling place in this very physical world. So this physical, in order to create a physical world, there was the contraction of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The removal, so to say, the concealment, the total concealment of the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we say. And yet even Shmoi is, even in Shmoi, because Hashem, Hu Shmoi Echad, so even Shmoi, like we say, is Nizkav, is too exalted. Only Haide, only that ray, becomes the source of energy of Shemayim and Aretz. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates Atzilos, Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah, till this Elam Asiyah, which is the lowest of the low within the entire order of revolution. And there HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted a domain for himself, a domicile for himself. He could feel comfortable precisely in this world, even more than Bri Yitzir Asiyah, as Dr. Rebbe famously has. It's worth to look into the famous chapters 36 and 37 of Likutei Amarim, a click away, first segment. This is where HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to be. Why? We don't know why. He desired, the famous expression of the Alter Rebbe, underscored by the Rebbe Rashab in his famous Memorim, Tavar Yisrael Vov. Nafatai Viskinkashinish, we can't ask a question on an inner lust and inner proclivity. And we know that. And of course, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're talking about a divine desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to have a dira b'tachtei, the dwelling place for himself. This is the place which HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted his being to be manifest through this avodah, through the service of the Yid, takes the neshama, brings him down into this world and says, you have the most divine mandated mission to bring my presence, my malchus, my reign, my presence down here in this world, the fusion of the Ein Sof with the lowest of low, with Elam Haza. It's man's objective, man's goal, and man's mandate. And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu created all of it. And that's the reason why I created Matzilus, the beginning of the evolution. The Elamis Eliyainim, the Elamis Nalamin Lenkates is the reason for the Elamis Nalamin Lenkates, because eventually Hashem wants lower worlds, Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah, and ultimately this physical world. Because even HaKadosh Baruch Hu had a desire to have a dwelling place and an abode in this very physical world. So because that was Hashem's goal, and that was Hashem's objective, therefore, the aura which comes down and establishes all that, one way or another, is divided into the 613 because it doesn't lose focus on the reason and the objective of the whole entire idea. A quick example. This professor or this deep thinker gives a presentation, or let's use it many times when we speak about this, a Talmid Chacham. He has a whole class, and he's teaching. He wants, of course, everybody to engage and to be involved, and he gives it all he got. And again, it's a talent to be the great Talmid Chacham, to have that great knowledge, and yet to be a teacher, to be able to condense, talking Tzimtzum again, and to teaspoon all these new students, especially students which are not acquainted of this study, and they're pretty much starting anew, and to be able to share with them his knowledge. But this example exists on every single level. New class, new information that I'm excited to teach, and I want everybody to be involved and engaged. But let's say, for whatever reason, this individual, this teacher, has in mind, has focused on two of his students, even one of his students, but this group of students, he wants them more than anybody to appreciate his lessons. He finds within them a certain talent that they will be the prodigies of the next generation, let's say, or the teachers to this institution, and they are going to contribute one day and much quicker than all the other students. They are the future of the school. They are the future of the community, and they're going to be the teachers. They're going to be the masters. And so he goes, and of course he wants everybody to get a correct. Teacher should never prioritize a few students over others. Everybody has to be involved. But it's not a contradiction to even a good teacher and a proper teacher and an honest teacher to appreciate the talents and qualities of his students, that they should excel based on their talents, based on their qualities, perhaps even more than others. So as he's giving over the lesson, day in, day out, somewhat his mind is focusing on those few students, because he picks up how they absorb and their unique talent and qualities are distinct in the other students. So of course he's a proper teacher, he wants everybody to engage, but there's something about him thinking about them on every single day of his of his teaching. Every one of his teaching, every one of his presentations. So together with his involvement in teaching the entire class, if it's a class of 30 as an example, and it's okay as well. It's not a contradiction. We're talking about even a proper teacher. And he makes sure everybody's engaged and everybody knows the stuff and the same curriculum and the same tests and the same excitement and the same attention to every single student. But the signals are always focusing, are always expressing, there's always shooting, the signals are always shooting of those few students, which in the very beginning of the onset he heard from the previous teachers, from day one, they are unique in their perception, they have unique talents, and therefore, in every one of his presentations, every one of his teachings, is always focusing on those three students, those two students, that one student. How's he doing? Is he getting it? Is he utilizing his maximum talent? Because I see and I foresee as a teacher that this student is going to be the teacher for the next generation, let's say, as an example. So what is happening over here is, something general happening over here. He's a teacher. It's not something, he's dealing with, as a teacher, of course. Any teacher would tell you that you're talking about a detailed and connection with every single student, and it's with maximum precision, learning, appreciating the talent of every single student, as an example. But when you have certain children or certain students in your class with a unique and disproportionate type of qualitative talents, it's okay that as you're teaching, your signal, your mind is on them one way or another, simultaneous to being that teacher that your mind is on every single one of your students, the way it's meant to be. And now this example is not accurate, because in the end of the day, the entire purpose of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is about man and about man's performance of Hashem's holy Torah and mitzvahs, fulfilling the ultimate mandate of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Lasas lo yizbarach dira b'tachteinim. That is the ultimate purpose. So that's not an accurate example, because in this case, the ultimate purpose is that each one of the students should grow and establish themselves very well with a great anchor in connection to the information which is conveyed to them, especially when we're talking about Torah and Torah knowledge, which ultimately will allow them to grow and excel in their identifying with Torah and mitzvahs, and learning and Torah in depth in their future as through Miyidin and so on. Of course, all this is very important. We just use it as a little example. Therefore, maybe the Torah mitzvahs is not an accurate teacher of Torah is not accurate, because ultimately the attention really has to be equally shared to every one of the students. But we're just giving this an example. So maybe talk about other studies to be a little more accurate, that it should fit a little bit this which Alter Rebbe is saying over here. So not to go into the details of this metaphor, but the overall, we can appreciate that when someone is giving over, when someone is accomplishing, and in this case, being an accomplished teacher, it's fine and it makes sense that they're thinking about the success of a few students, because they see a unique and different type of talent in a few students. So again, even in every area, the teacher has to be able to extract the talent of every student. But just as an example, that when you're doing something simultaneous to whatever you're doing, you're focusing on something very special, which you see in front of your own eyes. So too when it comes to the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And again, all the details, of course, are inaccurate, but the idea we could definitely glean from this example. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing all this, the whole purpose of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to become the source of any type of creation, any type of emanation, which would be, let's say, Atzilus, or creation, or formation, or Na'asim associated with Na'asim, is only because there, in the end of the day, there should be this Yidel, this Yid which is performing Torah mitzvahs. That is the ultimate of all. That is the ultimate purpose of all creation. So the Alter Rebbe says the Oyer itself, the light itself, is one way or another, because that's the ultimate purpose of creation. So the light itself is divided into the number of 613, because 613 is about Torah, which is again the purpose of creation. And we say Bereshis Baruch Oretz. Bereshis is a combination. Beis Reshis. The world was created for Torah and for Yidden, which means the world was created for Torah, not the Torah should be lying on the shelf. It's in order the Yid should take out the Torah, learn the Torah, apply the Torah. So it's the combination of Am Yisrael and the Torah. So you have in the Torah the number 613 mitzvahs. We have the Yid, the Neshama of the Yid, which is also divided into 613. Similar to the body, divided into 613. There's 248 organs, limbs, and there's 365 sinews, and so too within the Neshama, as it says, there's also combined of 613 Eivarim, so to say, and then 365 Gidim, which is again, of course, in a spiritual plane. And the Yid connects with its 613, so to say, types of energies which exist in Torah, and learns Torah, combines with Torah, applies Torah, fuses himself together with Torah, unites together with the energy of Torah, and with this, in the established, again, he brings the Torah. For that matter, that's why the body, that's the reason the person is supposed to sublimate the guf in his nefesh bahamis, and therefore the guf, which is body and his animal soul, therefore the body itself also is divided to 613, the 248 limbs, and 365 sinews, because the whole point is that the body itself should become part of the Torah experience, and ultimately be able to bring about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's plan for creation to make the world a world living and experiencing the experience of Torah, ultimately as the Achdus, the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is again namely expressed in Torah, because Torah is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and when the Yid learns Torah and lives the life of Torah, he brings about the Achdus Hashem, which exists in Torah, and he fuses it with, again, with the world, ultimately. The world, is Hashem. Is the world, and then Hashem's reign becomes manifest in the entire world. Hashem, that the whole world is filled with the knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch. So starting from the human being, the body of the human being is also divided into 613. So because it's all about the 613, and that's the objective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in all of Hashem's, again, the emanation and creation, information, and action of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and bringing into action, so to say, corresponding to Elam Hasi, and ultimately this world. That's the ultimate purpose of creation. So the ray itself, says the Alter Rebbe, is ultimately divided into 613. Because there's never a loss of focus. That the whole reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed the Haid to emanate or create or formate the source of formation and the source of Elam Asiyah is ultimately for men to connect with Torah, and the Torah is divided into 613. Man's neshama, there's the 613. In the end of the day, also his body is also divided into 613 for the reason we mentioned before. So the Eir itself, the light itself, says the Alter Rebbe, is divided into 613. This trickle of light, as we call it, is divided into 613. Where's the Alter Rebbe going with this? We'll see Bez Hashem next week. Alter Rebbe himself says, in the end, it's not that 613 is a little more bederech klal, just like we find in mitzvahs. There's so many details in mitzvahs. Like the mitzvah tefillin, it's one mitzvah of the 613, but there's hundreds of details within the mitzvah of tefillin, as we know, but Shulchan Aruch. You see, there's so many details, myriads of details in that one mitzvah. So then the bederech prat, it comes into so many details, but generally the 613. And then it comes into the Prat, and what Alter Rebbe is going to explain, again, eventually, with this idea that everything is divided. In other words, this Ziv being divided into 613, we'll be able to understand the idea of Chalkeinu, and ultimately Geiraleinu, in which, again, we'll accurately explain these verses, with these expressions, these verses that Alter Rebbe brought in the very beginning of this chapter. and namely this recitation, Asher Mativ Chelkeinu Umanoim Goyrolenu, and ultimately, as we mentioned at the very beginning of last week's class, the Alter Rebbe brings an important message, an enormous centralistic message to the Eved Hashem context of his Avodah, the generation he was placed in this world to be able to stay focused, and what he or she, his or her mandate is in this world. Unique mandate in this world, which it doesn't remain b'derech klal, it comes in to a detailed type of avodah which is given to every single yid. Every yid is indispensable, and every generation has its mission and so on. Again, as the Alter Rebbe will bring this message home based on this recitation. We look forward to continue. B'ezras Hashem. Have a wonderful night.